rise for pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for coming. I know a lot of people are watching this meeting tonight. It's one of the most important meetings we've had in a long time. First order of business is citizens' time. Is there anybody who is not here for an agenda item that'd like to speak to the Board of Health? I see none. We can move on. Chairman's report. There is nothing at this time except Happy New Year, everybody. I wish you a happy and a healthy 2020. Subcommittee reports we will hold to the next agenda item, and that is the application for special, actually, I'm sorry, I missed something. We have to go back to approval of minutes. And before we begin, I just want to mention publicly that Ms. Cathcart, Dawn, they're fabulous. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
We have two sets of minutes to approve tonight. The first is November the 12th.
Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve the minutes for Tuesday, November 12th, 2019.
Second.
I have a motion and I have second. Looks like all of us were present. That's what I'm checking right now. If there's no other corrections, omissions, or discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. The next one we have that have to be approved. And I get them because I...
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the minutes for Tuesday, December 10th, 2019.
Second.
Any other discussion? And the answer is yes. Line 3, it says, for line 1 says board members present. Line 3 says board members present. It should say not present. So if we could please add the word not present. I'm counting now.
Those are director's vote.
Yes, we have the 3 members who are present, so I can call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
We have 2 abstentions, 3-0-2. Okay, which brings us down for an application of special permits, 164 Middlesex Turnpike.
I thought this was Bob.
Okay. So, please sign in.
Chair. Oh, we can sign in, sure.
Please sign in and print, please. Thank you. All 3 sign in.
Yep.
And while she's signing in, please state your name.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Christine Hung from Reamer and Bronstein, attorney for the applicant Poly6 Technologies, Inc. With me tonight, I have Matthew Stellmaker, who is the co-founder and general manager of Poly6, and also Yana Knopf, who is the director of materials development.
I'm sorry. Could you please spell your name again, please?
Ioana Knopf.
Good.
Poly6 is a cutting-edge advanced materials manufacturing company that spun out of MIT's Langer Lab in 2016. They specialize in the global aviation industry and 3D printing. They currently have offices in Boston, but they're looking to relocate their corporate headquarters to here in Burlington at 164 Middlesex Turnpike, which is in the Northwest Park. We have applications for special use permits in front of the planning board. We're going to be before the planning board on Thursday night. In addition, we've been meeting with members of the municipal boards. We had a DCM meeting this morning, and that went well. Last week, we had a subcommittee meeting with the Board of Health, and I believe we answered many of your questions at the time. And Christine sent us the draft conditions, and we've reviewed them, and they're all acceptable to us. Having said all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stellmaker right now, and he can give you go in greater depth of the business and the operations of the company, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the board. My name is Matthew Stelmaker. As Christine mentioned, I'm one of the two founders of Poly6 and currently serve as General Manager, Vice President. Poly6, to give you just kind of an overview, as Christine mentioned, we spun out of MIT in mid-late 2016. We've been around for about 2.5 years. Currently on staff, we have 16 full-time employees. We've pulled from surrounding community, we've pulled from MIT, Northeastern University, and other areas in greater Boston. We are desirous to come to Burlington because in Boston we have outgrown our space. Currently we are operating in the Boston University Photonics Center Incubator, and we cannot grow any further. We have a really good problem, which is that someone in the world wants to purchase and use that which we have produced, and as such we need to expand. We've chosen Burlington. One of my backgrounds is commercial real estate, and I looked broad and wide around all of Greater Boston. We looked down into Quincy, we looked in Charlestown, we looked in Woburn, we looked out west in Waltham, we looked up north, pushing further into New Hampshire, and to retain the types of talent that we want from both the core of Boston as well as kind of some of the more suburban areas, Burlington was a really good fit for us. So we've chosen this after about 1.5 years of searching. We really like Nordblom as a landlord. They've been really great with historical companies like Poly6. I am familiar with Rick Fulop at Desktop Metal. I know Anupam, who is the CEO at Vulcan Forms, 2 other 3D printing companies who have recently come into the Burlington market and specifically into the Nordblom Park, where we anticipate to come, and we're really excited to join. Specifically what Poly6 does, by unique nature of our company, we are a material science technology. And what that means is that our core competency, as we came out of MIT, was in the world of organic polymers. That has translated and morphed over the past 3.5 years to where we are now an organic polymers company as well as a manufacturing process technology company. And so that's kind of where our core competencies lie. We are coming to Burlington and building this facility. It's a 12,000 square foot facility, as Christine mentioned, at 164 Middlesex Turnpike. We'll take the entirety of the second floor, and the purpose for use that we have is continuing development of our technology, and then small-scale kind of prototyping as we develop out manufacturing processes. So we've got a space that will serve as a lean lab so that we can think about how do we automate and build machines to do that which humans are doing currently, how do we set up 3D printers, and in which configurations, as well as developing out the process controls for what is our organic synthesis of our polymers that we place into 3D printers. Our main focus currently from an industry standpoint is the global aviation sector. There are 2 reasons that we're very excited about this, both resulting from the enablement of higher efficiency jet engines. Higher efficiency jet engines mean reduced fuel consumption in the overall airplane. Currently, the global aviation sector is in the largest scale-up in history, where there are over 30 years of backlogged airplanes on order that have yet to be delivered. The growth is coming from increase in economic prosperity in Southeast Asia and Africa, as well as Latin America. And largely, this is putting pressures on supply chain in Europe and North America, given the strength and the history in the aviation sector. Poly6 is participating in this. And as we enable higher efficient engines, why we get excited, this reduces the cost of air travel because there is reduced fuel consumption. Fuel consumption for an airline is somewhere around 40% of their entire P&L. It's their largest expense by far, the cost of jet fuel. Secondly, the reason that our team really likes this is reduced fuel consumption means reduced carbon that goes into the environment. The global aviation sector is top 5 perpetrators for global carbon emissions, which is affecting our generation primarily in the realm of global warming. and our team derives a lot of our motivation. Our mission statement is directly aimed at reducing global carbon emissions in the aviation sector to combat climate change. We won't solve all of it, but we want to be a player in that. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the board for questions. I'm here as a founder to answer and head of this company to answer any high-level questions. Iwana is here. She has a PhD in organic chemistry and a background in inorganic chemistry as well from UPenn and MIT, and she leads all of our materials development. So if there are any questions, so long as we don't give any of our top secret things away, we're happy to answer questions from the board.
Dr. Noth, do you have anything to add?
Not for now. No, we want to hear your questions.
Okay. What you have in front of you, the board, is an application, a map of the location, an interior layout in front of you. You have the subcommittee minutes, which should answer many questions, but I'll ask my colleague, the vice chair, to just quickly give an overview to the subcommittee minutes. And then you have the conditions prepared by both the subcommittee and our director and staff. So you all have that in front of you.
Subcommittee minutes. We have subcommittee minutes?
Yeah, it's on
There
the,
it was.
it's on the agenda. It's on the,
Under minutes, subcommittee minutes.
I can give you that if you'd like,
Subcommittee
Doctor.
reports. You want a hard
On the
copy?
agenda,
No, I got it.
You got it?
Right there.
first item after.
Never mind.
Got it.
Thank you.
Mr. McSwaney?
yeah, so we had a very productive meeting with Matt and Christine last week, I guess it was. And personally, very excited to have this business move into town. I think this is exciting for Burlington. It's the type of companies that we want coming into the town, for sure. We had a pretty lengthy discussion. You did a thorough overview in the subcommittee, as you did here. They have hired, a consulting firm, Safety Partners, to develop a chemical handling and emergency action plan for them, and they're following, it's pretty in-depth, and they're following everything that the staff has asked them to follow. In their build-out, as you probably see in your diagram, and they shared that with us as well last week, they have an opportunity to build out around the chemical handling, so they're able to do the, safety access, restricted access to certain employees, and there's all logs and very detailed plan on how that is going to be managed. But all in all, answered all of our questions. Very exciting company, and I think the staff was comfortable with the action plan and the chemical handling plan that they're developing with Safety Partners. So. Yep.
Please.
I do have a question. And I think you guys did read that about the team that they're working with for the safety plan. And currently, there is no tenant on the first floor, correct? Is there safety and action plan, does that protect for when tenants are in that plan?
Yeah, I think the access, for example, they're separate loading docks, and they'll have key card access and to their, like chemical storage areas and whatnot, and it'll be segregated from any future first floor tenant.
If there's an emergency in the building that affects does it notify all the tenants? Like, how does that system work? Like,
We don't have their final
Okay.
security plan yet, but
Okay.
that should be addressed. It should be just like a tenant at 55, at Network
Exactly.
Drive, or,
yeah, that's what I
And
assume.
we would work with the building department on that too, in terms of that building.
Why don't we allow Mr. Stelmaker, did I get it right?
You got it right.
Mr. Stelmaker, you did a nice job with the subcommittee. Just very quickly, just summarize what the safety, security measures are.
Yeah, sure. So, the nice part, while we are on the second floor, as Christine mentioned, we have our own loading dock. The way that the grade works here at the building is that where we all enter is at grade, and the first floor enters from a totally separate side of the building, and so there's no interchange between the two floors. Additionally, for purposes of external access to some of the proprietary technologies that we have, all of the exterior doors will be card access to where only employees will be allowed in. Furthermore, for dual reasons, one of which is internal protocols as we protect trade secret even from our employees internally, and also part of our safety procedures with our chemical hygiene plan, we will have certain areas that have chemicals in them that do not have, that where employees are not given access. So for example, an accountant will not have access to that room unless they are accompanied by somebody like Ioana, who has been trained in specific areas of the chemistry. So we're working with, as has been mentioned, with safety partners to develop out our full chemical hygiene plan. We've already consulted Clean Harbors. They have been doing waste management for us, and they're a big, well-known, reputable firm. And just to be overly safe, we've consulted also with ARUP. They're a fire consultancy out of Boston as well. And we're very deep in negotiation, or not negotiation, but back and forths with Nordblom to make sure that they have comfort, as well as, any of the building departments, all of this.
I asked you, you can answer a question again, would you have a concern if there was a daycare on the first floor?
No.
That was one of the first questions we asked.
Thank you.
I wanted to do that publicly. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Then I will entertain a motion to approve the special permit for 164 Middlesex Turnpike.
Mr. Chairman, so moved.
Second?
I have motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Welcome to Burlington.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Director, do we need to separately approve the subcommittee minutes?
No, you generally don't approve the subcommittee minutes,
Okay.
so, yeah.
Welcome to Burlington, and please stay in touch with our staff.
We will. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you
in.
very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck. Now, hearings. This is a long time in coming. We need to do this, and we should have done this a long time ago, but technology has changed so quickly, and we didn't have to, but now we do. And we have to get this done, hopefully prior to town meeting. I want to thank our director, and I want to thank our staff, Marlene, and I want to thank Christine for spending a lot of time on this. Members of this board spent a lot of time on this. This is probably one of the most important Board of Health biosafety regulations that we have ever approved. You have them in front of you. We're going to have a brief presentation by our director, and then I'll open it up to questions, and then questions from the floor if anybody has them before we deliberate. Susan?
Okay. So as you know, these regulations came about in response to some zoning changes that are proposed to come before town meeting, allowing biotechnology by right in certain areas of the town. So this would require them to come to the Board of Health, even if they didn't need to go to the planning board to get a permit from the Board of Health. We have already talked to the building department and have managed a way through the software that if a biotechnology company comes to town, we will get notice of that, and we'll be able to contact them and let them know that they need to get a permit. So within these regulations, it also covers RDNA. So if this gets passed, we will no longer need the RDNA regulations. So there is an item on the agenda to rescind those regulations because after you pass these, because they'll no longer be needed. So everything that's in the current RDNA regulations is in these regulations. It talks about the NIH guidelines, which is in the current RDNA regulations. So I'm just going to go through this. Oops. Let's see. Okay, so I just wanted to give a little bit of a background and talk about some of the terminology that are in the regulations. So risk group versus biosafety level. So risk group describes an agent, and biosafety level describes a level of containment needed for a particular agent. So here I talk a little bit about how, what that means for, I'm not going to read it all, but I think you're familiar with this to some extent with regards to the RDNA regulations. The risk groups correlate with the biosafety levels, but they do not equate to them. So in a risk group is one factor to be considered when you're determining a biosafety level, but there are other factors as well. And these 4 factors here are what should be considered when you are determining what biosafety level you're going to be at. And every organization has to conduct their own risk assessment to determine what the appropriate biosafety level is. So for example, you can have an agent such as anthrax, which is a risk group 2 agent. However, depending on the process, it might come in as biosafety level 2 or biosafety level 3. So it kind of depends on what is happening with that agent. Oops. So what is regulated and permitted? So the use of RDNA, so that's regardless of the risk group or of the agent. So no matter what risk group you're in, if you're doing RDNA, you would need to get a permit. Risk group 3 agents, which I have provided in your materials, the NIH risk groups. And there's a listing of all the risk group 3 agents. And then, so the risk group 3 agents are those associated with serious or lethal harm for disease for which preventative or therapeutic interventions may be available. So it includes things like yellow fever, certain influenza viruses. It also regulates select agents. So I've also provided to you a list of select agents. And a select agent means a biological agent that could pose a severe threat to public health and safety. So back to anthrax, even though anthrax is a risk group 2 agent, it's not a risk group 3 agent. However, it is a select agent because it poses a severe threat to public health and safety. So therefore, if it was a company utilizing anthrax, they would need to get a permit because it falls under the select agents. So what is not regulated under the permit? So risk group 1 and 2 agents, unless it's a select agent, or if RDNA is being conducted. So a laboratory could be using a risk group 1 agent or risk group 2 agent. And if those agents are not select agents and they're not utilizing RDNA, they wouldn't need a permit. Clinical laboratories, so a clinical laboratory located within a healthcare facility or a professional analytical service that directly supports clinical or healthcare services is not regulated. And then educational institutions utilizing commercially available molecular biology teaching kits. So what is prohibited? The use of biosafety level 4 containment and the use of risk group 4 agents. So if it's biosafety level 4 or risk group 4, it's prohibited. Some other areas to consider under these regulations, because we have the regulations, the guidelines now become enforceable. So right now, biological laboratory would follow the CDC, BMBL, or the NIH guidelines if they were doing RDNA. So those are guidelines. However, if you pass these regulations, they now become enforceable. It allows for consultant review. So if we feel that a company comes forward and we want to have an outside consultant look at it, there's a section in the regulations that allow for that. And there's a permitting process that goes along with it. So there's certain steps in the regulations that companies would need to take to obtain a permit. Okay. So I just wanted to go over a little bit of what the permitting process would be. They would have to submit their permit application, and then submit certain materials, and all those materials are outlined in the regulation. For first-time permits, they would have to come to the Board of Health meeting and conduct a presentation. So this would be for new applicants only, so not for if they're renewing a permit. Anyone now who currently has an RDNA permit with us would need to come to a Board of Health meeting. They would need to give us everything that's required in the regulations and then do a presentation before the Board of Health. Now, in the regulations, it asks for certain things that should be included in this presentation. One would be the general introduction, the timeline, the overview of the biosecurity risk assessment and program, and then the discussion of the facilities. So this is what, at a minimum, they should be talking about when they're coming before you.
My question is, if they're coming, like, we already have approved permits for, I think, 2 places.
The RDNA permits.
Right, the RDA, now, are they under the new, if we pass this tonight, are they considered new applicants?
Yeah,
And so they have to go through the new applicant procedure?
right. So anyone who currently has an RDNA permit would need to come and get a permit under these regulations.
Okay.
It's a different process, yeah. So for permit renewals, they would not need to appear before the Board of Health. So if everything was the same, and if we didn't think there was any issues, there was no problems in the past, we would just renew their permit and they wouldn't have to come before the board.
And this is an improvement, because each year we required the proponent to try the company to come before us. And for the most part, they said the same thing as they said the
Right.
first time around. If there are major changes, they'll come. If not, they do not. They just have to renew, and that would be up to the purview of the director, the staff, and the chair.
Right. And also, what's nice about this is that there's a timeline for it. So we want you to submit your applications by a certain date, and then we're going to renew the permits at a certain date. So it'll streamline things in the office a little bit, so we're not doing them at all different times of year. One last thing, in the regulations, there is a requirement for an IBC, which that is in the guidelines. And we included a Board of Health staff member to sit on the IBC for all of these. And for the RDNA regulations, we have a member of a community member, a member of the public, which is usually Jim Harrison, has sat on many of them. So for RDNA, they would still be required to have the community representative there present. But if you were not doing RDNA, you wouldn't need to have that person on your IBC. It would just be a staff member from the Board of Health. So that's a quick overview. Any specific questions?
First, the board. We've seen some of this before. I just want to point out that under Section 11, penalties, we did have a discussion, and we proposed this to town council, and they have agreed. If you take a look at under D, last paragraph, in the event of the Board of Health or its agents terms there is an imminent threat to public health and safety, it may suspend a permit immediately without prior notice. Any institution thereafter may invoke the hearing process in Section 12 to appeal said suspension. We wouldn't expect that to ever happen, but if there was ever a major emergency at one of these biologic companies, we want to be able for the Board of Health to suspend, probably in conjunction with the Burlington Fire Department, who we have a wonderful relationship with.
So I guess the take-home is that any new company coming in who the Board of Health has the purview of determining whether they need to be regulated or not regulated.
Yeah, based on those requirements. So are they,
Which satisfies the concerns that brought us all here.
That brought us all here.
So any new company has to come under the scrutiny of the Board of Health.
well, you could have a company that does this type of work, but is only doing it at, say, a risk level 2.
No, I get that,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
but it's the Board of Health that that says, okay, you're here, we understand your risk group, we understand
Right.
your strategy, and you do not need to be regulated.
Right,
But everything comes under the Board of Health.
Correct. Prior to, there was a loophole where there were companies who could come into town at level 3 by right. All we're saying is the board needs to take a look at that and ensure safety to the community.
But-
That's what we're saying.
But for the community, just to make sure that everybody understands that, when you say by right, the idea beforehand was that if there was already a site that had been approved for that type of work, then any company could come in and assume that site. That's what it was.
Without any oversight.
With no,
Without any oversight. So now this obviates that, and now anyone who comes in going anywhere in the town of Burlington has to be evaluated by the Board of Health.
right. For all intents and purposes, this formalizes what we wanted and what we have been doing.
This also gives the board more control in that they're holding a permit. So if there's some kind of problem at the company or whatever, they would need to come before the board, because the board could suspend or revoke their permit.
Some might view this as being over-controlling and/or what are we worried about? The take-home is we're worried about the community, and we are advocating for the community.
Absolutely, Dr. Salzman. And I just want to point out, the 2 permits we have, is it 2?
3.
3 permits we have, all 3 of those corporations and schools and hospitals have been extremely professional. We have not had a problem. But this is something that we need to do for the next 100 years. So
This is being proactive.
this is being proactive. Great.
And I agree with the improvement of the renewal, that if there's no change, we don't need to. And Christine, do you still have to do a site visit? for
Yeah,
that?
so if they
Great.
have a permit, they'll be added to the
That's what I thought. Okay.
annual site inspections that I do.
I think that's great, the improvement of the renewals. Thanks.
We have a visitor. Would you like to make comment?
If I may,
Please come and sign in and identify yourself.
my name is John Price, and I'm here on behalf of Northeastern University in Boston. As you know, we have a campus here in Burlington, and we are part of the community. So I didn't prepare anything today, but I just want to commend Susan. Great job presenting this. And as you know, this is mirroring what's going on in Boston. As they revamped their permit. So everybody out there should be well educated. But it's good to hear from the board what their real concern is, and that's the community. And I support that 100% as well. So again, I didn't prepare anything today. The reason I came was just to kind of like sit in the back there and listen and be prepared. We probably will be doing biological research. Most likely it will be recombinant type work, but it'll definitely be the risk 1, 2 categories, so to speak. Because the Burlington campus, they have a lab there that's basically doing research on innovative equipment for blood analysis and things of that nature. So it's very, very important for medical science and research. The rest of the campus is material science, but again, it's an academic institution that does research. You don't know what's going to be in the future, so you just want to be prepared. So just a friendly comment, and mostly for my benefit, on section 6D, it basically says the IBC established herein shall not include a community representative unless utilizing regulated biological agents identified as recombinant or synthetic nucleic acid molecule in the most recent revision of the NIH guidelines. It seems restrictive that if we want to have a community member, we should still be able to have one. But I think this statement says you can't have one. Or am I just being am I reading that too closely?
Because we
Yeah,
don't
I
need
don't
one.
know if it's, I don't
need
I
one.
don't think it's that you can't, it's that
Yeah.
you don't, so you're looking, I'm sorry, you said 6D, I'm not on
Section
the,
6,
what?
D and what?
CD, yes.
Oh, C, C,
C, okay.
C, okay.
Oh. I think we can, that's not our intent. If you
Yeah.
We
want to
could,
have
we
one,
could
or-
change
yeah.
the shall to a may,
Yeah,
May,
may.
yeah.
and that will make it, not seem as restrictive,
Yeah,
or
I
won't
think
be as
that's-
Yeah,
restrictive.
that's fair.
As you know, everyone's going to read this, and they're going to read between the lines like,
Well,
That was not our intent. It was
yeah,
just, the need for it.
No,
Wait
I'll
a-
tell you, sorry.
No, I was gonna say that the intent was that in the NIH guidelines under RDNA, that is a requirement. However, it is sometimes a stumbling block and difficult for entities to find such a person for their IBC. And so we wanted to, where it wasn't an NIH requirement, alleviate a little bit of that hardship, but it was not meant to be restrictive.
Right, we have an IBC, and we are required under the NIH guidelines, the city of Boston, to have 2 community reps.
Right.
And it's very difficult. We give them a free lunch, but you can't, get parking. But, to come to these meetings, the science is very, very deep, so, those folks need to be commended.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we just want to be very, very clear that someone from the Board of Health will be on the committee.
Yes.
Yes.
But I think that's the same thing in Boston, but, you can imagine the number of institutions. The city of Boston can't send one to every single meeting, so it's kind of like a gray area, but obviously, we would want you there at least once a year.
Yep.
So I'll be more than happy to answer questions about our program. Again, we don't have immediate need to file for a permit, but on the other hand, we might file early just to get the paperwork in and.
You
tell
do
what-
file in Burlington,
No, not currently.
not currently, under the RDNA, doesn't our,
They do not have an RDNA.
They don't have
they don't
Yeah.
have RDNA, okay.
We have a hazardous material permit.
Correct.
And we've had that for several years, and proud to say that we pass every year, so it's good.
Northeastern's a member of our community. We're very proud of the relationship that we have. We welcome you tonight, and we look forward to ongoing collaboration as we move forward.
All right, thank you.
Just one question, I'm curious as to, you mentioned that Boston has similar regulations. How do these regulations compare to, as stringent or maybe more lenient than what you see? I'm assuming Boston's probably more.
No, they're mirroring
Similar?
the regulation,
Yeah.
except they're more focused on the BL3s and the BL4s.
Sure.
Boston does
Because they
allow
have
BL4s.
Right, that's interesting, yeah.
So they have the needle center. But here, you basically are a little bit more relaxed for 1 and 2 risk groups. But for the most part, everyone in Boston's doing reclamative
Doing the
work.
same thing, yeah. Great, thank you.
This is great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Are we going to make that change from shall to may? Does everyone agree to that?
We have to reword the whole thing then.
Why?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to improve the Burlington Board of Health biological safety regulations with the change in section 6, paragraph C, subparagraph D. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
C,
That
C.
instead of IBC established herein shall, should be changed to IBC established herein may.
May
May
include.
include.
May not
include.
include.
No,
No.
may not include. May include.
Here.
May include. May include.
May
May
include.
include, with that correction.
Okay.
Wait,
Does that mean,
May include,
I want to make sure that that's exactly, that if they are level.
That's not right.
Yeah, it does.
That
all
is
right.
not correct.
yeah,
Yeah,
may
okay.
not
May not.
include.
May not include, that's what I
Yes.
said.
Okay.
What do you people?
Didn't you say that in the beginning?
May,
May not.
how about need?
Can we just say it's at the
how about
discretion?
need not include?
Need not?
IBC need not include a community rep unless they are utilizing RDNA.
that's fine.
That sounds
Right,
good.
that's correct.
We've got to call the health agent.
So that's a stink bug.
I know, I'm very concerned.
Which
I know, but they stink.
Oh.
Don't kill it.
No, they don't
All right,
stink.
They
so
don't stink.
that's my
right.
motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have the wording correct. Now, do you have the, thank you.
Calling on my stuff.
Dawn has it. Then I'll put it to a vote. This is a historic vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 5-0. Thank you very much. Which now brings us to the next vote, which is a formality, and that is to rescind our biotech regulation, rDNA regulations. Get this all.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we rescind the regulations for the use of recombinant DNA technology as has been around for a while.
Any other comment? Any other?
I'll second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Now, this will be, again, placed in the newspaper, correct? And when does this go
And
into effect?
So it's effective upon publication. So I'll send it right away, and as soon as it gets published in the legal ad, it will be effective.
If you could just note, that it should be published quickly.
Yep.
We need that done very quickly. Excellent.
Is there, so I'm just looking through this letter now, so there's certain businesses that we need to notify, are we notifying all the businesses?
So we did notify them of this hearing
Okay,
tonight.
yeah.
We don't know what, the ones we knew of that could possibly fall into this category are the ones we notified. So it's possible we missed some, but we tried to get them all.
Gotcha. And the ones that do have to follow the new rDNA, they've been notified of the change?
Christine has
Or they
talked to
will
them,
be
yeah.
notified?
Spoken with two of them because their permits will be expiring shortly.
Soon, yeah.
So we'll have to have them in probably in
No, I
in
just have
March.
what's in here.
Great.
Um,
Okay, thank you.
The amendments to the Board of Health fee schedule?
Okay, yes.
And Susan, do you send notification to the other boards that you're gonna publish?
The other town departments,
Yes.
yes, I will send it out. So I'll send a copy of the new regulations to all the department heads, just to let them know.
You would, but thank you.
And I also, if I could, Mr. Chair,
Please.
I do want to thank Dr. Weiner. He has spent a lot of time, as well as the staff, but you really spent as an advocate. You went to a lot of the planning board sessions, spoke on behalf of the community and of the Board of Health, and I appreciate the work.
Thank you very much.
Here, here.
It's what we all do. Okay. And what I did was I mixed up all my stuff. So what is next? The
Board of Health.
Amendments to Board
amendments
of
to
Health.
the Board of
Schedule.
Health fee schedule is next.
Yes, so in the information that was provided to you, we did a comparison of the fees. So this is, last time this was done was in 2010, so it's been a while. It's time to update the whole thing. We needed to do it anyways, if these new regulations passed, to decide on the fee for the new regulations. So we provided to you, we did a survey of surrounding towns and what their fees are. That's been provided to you. And then also, there's a red line version of what our old fee schedule looked like with the new recommended fees on that. And then a cleaner version, retyped, that kind of categorizes the fees a little bit better, because the old fee schedule was kind of like food was all over the place, and so we changed it around just to make it seem a little bit, flow a little bit easier. And then also added to that is fees for septic, which we never even had, but over the years, the past 4 or 5 years, we've had to address septic issues, and we've had to come up with applications and a process if somebody wanted to replace their septic tank, but we never had any fees for that, so this will add fees to that as well.
Can you mention that the fees that are collected do not go to the Board of Health specifically to pay for anything or offset?
Right, so all the fees go to the general fund, so we don't.
Town general.
The town's general fund, yeah, so they don't go to the Board of Health. The old rDNA regulations had in it that we would keep the fees until the end of the year and then give them back to the general fund. I never knew why we did that, because it didn't seem like the fees weren't enough to cover much of anything anyways, and we weren't allowed to spend it anyways. So now all the fees for the biological safety will go to the general fund, and we'll no longer have to deal with holding on to fees until the end of the fiscal year, like we did before with the rDNA.
And I also, sorry, Dr. Weiner.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I also want to state that, we're not only raising fees, we're eliminating some fees, we're streamlining fees, we're reducing some fees. So this is just making sure that we're looking at things differently, better for the community. It's not just a mere raising of all of our fees.
Right, and one of the big things that, Marlene helped out with was the fees for the food permits. And one of them was, we used to charge a fee for every department. So if you were a supermarket and you had 10 departments, there was a fee for every department. So now it's just one flat fee for a multi-department place like a supermarket. So those fees for that will actually go down.
And the fees for our new regulation are no different from the biotech fees, from the recombinant DNA fees.
Right.
So there was not a change in that. Wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Any other questions? Any debate or?
No, I think it was a good point that David made note, is that we've eliminated some, because the last time we did the review, as you said, 2010, so I was looking at it.
Yeah, and some of them were
Outdated,
eliminated because, like, for instance, the drain layer, I mean, we used to do drain layer permit, which was really old regulations, so that was just taken out. So those types of things were eliminated too.
So, another real and important determination tonight. Do I have a motion to approve the new fee schedule?
So moved.
Do I second?
Second.
A second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Or abstain? 5-0. Brings us to reports. And I guess the first is,
Doug,
sorry?
can I just, Mr. Chairman, just one thing. Susan, you keep the fee schedule on our website?
Yes.
That's what I thought. Okay, great, in case folks want to look at it. Thank you. Thank you,
Just going to
sorry.
see where we are here.
Here.
Yeah, okay. Environmental engineer,
Good evening.
would you quickly summarize any important points?
Sure, a couple of highlights. The director and myself met with the building department to review the viewpoint, the fairly new viewpoint permitting software that the town has been implementing. And we helped him craft a series of questions so that when people come in to apply for a new building permit, if they may be subject to your newly adopted biological safety regulations, there are trigger questions that will immediately send them to the Board of Health in that online process. To segue back to what you were saying, Dr. Salzman, about the board has the review that says, okay, what are you doing? Yes, you need a permit. No, you don't need a permit. So that's baked into the online permitting software now. And the only other thing I wanted to highlight was that, again, with the director, we participated in a emergency operating center exercise, a nearly full day with a lot of other departments, in which we responded to a makeshift, or a mock, thank you, a mock incident of an active shooter at the mall, and actually staffed an emergency operations center as we would if such a incident did occur. It was very interesting and very informative. Any questions?
What's the Board of Health's role in an active shooter at a mall?
We would be, one of the things that we were looking at was sheltering or family reunification, assisting with that type of function.
Any other questions? I have none.
Nope.
But I want to thank you very much for all the work you did on the regulation. I know that was important.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the environmental engineering report.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 5-0. Brings us to health agent.
Good evening.
Ms. Johnson, please.
So we have statewide tobacco regulations, and I did include some of those changes in your paperwork, but I'll go over a few of them for the public. So the statewide tobacco regulations prohibit the sale of flavored vaping products. That includes menthol, and again, that's statewide. June 1st of this year, all flavored tobacco, cigarettes, and cigars, again, including menthol flavoring, will be prohibited. That's right. The fines have increased. So the fines for the first offense used to be $100, so those are going up to $1,000. This is for selling to a minor or selling to a person that is under 21. The second violation within 36 months was $200. It's going up to $2,000 with a suspension of the permit between 1 day to 7 days. That would be determined by the Board of Health. The third violation used to be $300, and that is going up to $5,000 with a permit suspension between 7 days to 30 days, again, to be determined by the Board of Health. And the period in between those, again, is, they're all 36 months between the current and the last violation. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Christine, Samantha, and I are working together on a presentation called Food Code Review. And it's scheduled for the food service establishments. Invitations are going out tomorrow. It's scheduled for February 19th at the Burlington High School Auditorium. And the topics include chemicals in the workplace, grease traps, and common violations of the food code will be reviewed, and a question and answer period as well. And the last thing I wanted to mention specifically to the public who may be watching is that I was alerted that there may be a food truck operating in Burlington that's not permitted. So I just want to remind folks that, especially at office buildings, there usually is one person that will coordinate these trucks to come in, and everybody who has a permit should be displaying that, and it's perfectly okay to say, "Can I see your permit?" And look at that expiration date, and if it's not within today's date, if it's expired, please let us know. Just give us a call, let us know where the truck is, what time the truck was there, because I can easily go and find them if I know where they are, when they are there, and we'll get them permitted and inspected.
And they will rue the day.
That active shooter training.
You know, Mr. Chair, I just want to remind our community that the Board of Health was very proactive in looking at these issues with flavored e-cigarettes and the impact on the youth in our town well over a year before this actually became a crisis. So I laud the board for taking action that it did.
Thank you, that's great. Okay, any other questions from Arlene?
Mr. Chair, make a motion to.
No, I have one.
Oh.
I have one more. Upon investigation, violations were found with labels missing list of ingredients, and label made a therapeutic claim which is not allowed per FDA. How did that get through?
What do you mean, how did it get through?
How did the company who was selling this, how did they find
That's
this?
a good question. They just slapped a label on their product that they make on site, so fortunate.
They make it on site.
That they make on site, right. So fortunately,
Somebody
we
was-
had a consumer contact our office.
Somebody was smart enough to say, hey,
It
That's-
doesn't do.
that's
what it's-
great.
What was the, you remember, what was the therapeutic claim?
I don't
You
recall.
don't remember?
Don't
Okay,
recall.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So if anybody sees that type of labeling or lack of labeling, please notify the Board of Health. Now, Doctor,
Actually, just one comment. I noticed the change in in your report, your staff report on the reinspection, so thank you for that. I
Oh, sure,
appreciate it. Yeah.
sure.
Doctor?
I'm a little gun shy now.
I turn to this section of the board.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the health agent report.
Second.
Have a motion, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, 5-0, thank you. Okay, which brings us to the Director of Public Health.
Just to let the board know, the MRC Region 4, the two MRCs within Region 4A, which is us and MRC Region 4A MRC, has finally been able to agree on a funding formula for next year. So The base is 4,500 plus population, with the caveat that that cannot go under $5,000, because that was my initial concern. You know, if funds start getting cut, now we're getting less than we have gotten in the past. So that can't go under $5,000. So next year, we'll see a little bit more. I think it's like 7,200 or something for the MRC funding. And right now, Samantha and Katie in our office are working on a training plan for next year. So what I'd like to do is, we've always kind of had trainings, try to scramble them, you know, during the year. I'd like to have, you know, a full year schedule for the next year on what our trainings are gonna be for the following year. So they're working on that, and hopefully we can use some of those funds for trainings, because I think it's important to have, you know, quality trainings for the MRC members, so.
Great.
I have a question. I noticed that you had a conversation with Mr. Sanchez in the DPW about Ray Ave. What was the substance of that?
So, I wanted to find out, you know, what was going on there from the DPW's perspective. I reviewed the reports that come into us, and sat down with him, and they really haven't been seeing anything different. I mean, they're still seeing grease coming out of Cafe Escadrille side. So now we're just trying to determine next steps. The Board of Health has a subcommittee meeting on this Friday to discuss. And, you know, the subcommittee will decide from there, I guess, what next steps we should take to try, and John's gonna attend that meeting as well, to move forward.
So,
Because the
So
goal
there's-
ultimately is for them to have less cleanings
Right.
there than what they're doing now, and he hasn't been able to do less.
so it's been 2 years now?
3?
I'd have to go back and check, I
But
don't know.
they increased the dosage of the material.
Dosage has always stayed the same.
I thought they increased the dosage.
So looking at the last year's report, their dosing has been consistent.
Do
And
we
there's
not
been no
have-
change in the grease?
They did a cleaning, they said they did an additional cleaning, so they haven't
They've
really.
increased.
They may have increased the dosage like prior to a year ago, but for the past year, it's been consistent.
Do we not have a meeting on the books coming up to further discuss that in subcommittee?
We do,
And it's this Friday at
this Friday at 9 AM.
9 a.m., and I will be there along with
I look forward to that.
Vice Chair. So we haven't
Okay.
forgotten it. We are meeting Friday.
But there's been nothing downstream that, I
No
forget his
backups.
name, who, yeah.
Yeah, no backups have occurred.
And the last question I have has to do with communications between the schools and our responsibilities for specific students. And what are our responsibilities versus the school nurses around vaccines?
So,
Or shall I hold that for the next meeting with the supervisory nurse?
so.
I mean, we
if you-
don't have any specific responsibilities.
No.
The school has a responsibility to reach out if they need to, and then we need to respond to that.
Right, so,
Correct.
so we provide vaccines for children who are uninsured or underinsured, and through the Vaccine for Children program. One of the things that the school head nurse has reached out to us about was having the schools bring students to our office, or us going there, getting them vaccinated without the parents present. So I had gone to town council and asked town council, and she came up with a form that, you know, said, you know, this is the form that you can use to do this.
Without the parents'
Right.
knowledge or understanding?
Well, the parents would sign the form, or the
Okay,
guardian
okay, all right,
would
okay,
sign the form, and we would get the form back. And someone from the school, though, would be there with the child and accompany the child. So we developed a draft, like, protocol. I wanted to have a discussion with the schools and to say, you know, do you have any comments on this draft protocol? What do you think? I haven't, we got a call actually today from one of the school nurses looking to bring a child over without the parent, and I said, well, we haven't finished that protocol. I wanted to talk to the schools first. I reached out to the schools, and I haven't heard back from them. So, you and I had
How do you know
discussed
there's
this protocol.
signature?
This is, wow. I think that this matter should come before the board.
Is that fine?
I think that the school should, I think that we need to have an understanding under public scrutiny of exactly what the responsibility of the Board of Health is and how the Board of Health can support the schools. But just to think that a school nurse called you and said, I want to bring a kid over without the parent's knowledge to get a shot, oh, that just rubs me the wrong way.
So, I'm not even sure, like, if the school is on board with anything like that as well, like this, what the superintendent or the assistant superintendent, what their thoughts are on it. I haven't heard back from them. They may say, we don't,
Yeah, they may be doing it.
we don't want to
without
bring
the
children
knowledge of
over.
anybody, right?
You
Yeah.
know, because the school would then, may get into a transportation type of issue with the schools, because we're not transporting the students, they would be, you know? So I don't know.
Yeah, but it goes beyond that also.
Yeah.
It goes beyond the fact that these are underage individuals.
Yeah.
So many things about that are wrong. To take a child off of school campus without the parent's knowledge, one. and-
Transportation.
Yeah, the transportation, and two, to actually have a procedure done, a shot's a procedure, have a procedure done on a kid without a parent knowing, that, oh gosh, can you imagine? Can you imagine?
So,
I'm gonna ask one question too. Would we give a flu shot without a parent present?
We wouldn't give any shot without a parent present.
Right, that's what, I mean.
Right,
okay, That's what I
now.
thought.
I just want to make
Well,
sure
this-
our response
this
is
is-
no,
It-
you know, but.
So if that's, so we've done some research on it to see like, okay, could this actually be done? You know, and now we're at the point with the schools, you know, who wants this? Does the school, you know, is this something that the superintendent and the school committee, whatever, wants to do? And that, I don't know. I mean, I said, okay, well, we'll look into it, see if it's possible. And then, you know, what we can do is, you know, if I hear back from them, right now it's dead in the water because we haven't, but bring them back to the board
if
for.
you'd like me to speak to the chairperson of the school committee, we'll talk about it tomorrow.
I'm sure it's a.
Do you want to
maybe
move
I shouldn't
forward
be
with
sure,
it?
right, but I'm sure it's
Not without approval.
that person just going rogue and it's not a directive of the school committee. I wouldn't think that would be the.
I mean, I would send a.
Where did this come
Well,
from?
it
I mean,
came from the head nurse,
Yeah, but she should have been in conversation with the superintendent and/or the school
That's why I
committee
You know,
before she
I would
came
send
with
a,
this.
frankly, I would, instead of you're trying to play phone tag with people, I would send a letter from the Board of Health saying this is an issue. You know, put my name on it as the guy who's in charge of all the vaccinations. But I think,
You could do that, and he could sign it.
and I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
As a representative of the, as a Board of Health
So-
member and the medical director for blah, blah.
It sounds like, so Ed and I, we had talked about this. But is this something that you want to, in that letter, do you want to put, this is something we absolutely do not want to do? Is that?
No, we want to have an understanding of what the school's policy is, and we would suggest, and either respond back with what they're thinking about, or say, we would be delighted to have you come before the Board of Health with the community watching, and have us come to an understanding of what we should do to support these children. The Board of Health will support these children, but there has to be some protocols to that.
Right. So that's what
There
we
needs
would,
to be like a policy or something out of the
That's what I
school
mean.
committee.
Well, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Well,
I
see,
don't know
that's-
if the school, I don't know if the school, this comes out of the
Okay,
purview of the school.
why don't we
committee.
start?
They need to know what's going
Why don't we start
on.
here with a letter? All right, we start here?
why don't I forward you what, because there was another issue too, which she had brought to our attention, where interpretation of records was something that we'd gone through. I mean, records can be interpreted through the pink book, so I wasn't quite sure, you know,
Interpretation of student records?
Yeah, who should be interpreting them, either the schools or the Board of Health? So, I mean,
I think the Board of Health should be the end stream participant once all the i's have been dotted and the t's have been crossed. I don't think that we should be, well, we can have, we
Yeah.
can make this a discussion
Yes.
Why don't I-
on the agenda, but I think that this, I'm agitated by this.
why don't I send you the draft of what, you know, from our end? And then, so we said, okay, this is a possible draft from our end. I don't know where the schools lie on this, how,
I'm very concerned.
Okay, as our
I mean,
medical director, Dr. Salzman, is concerned, then we're all concerned.
yeah,
Okay? All right, if you could send him a draft?
yeah,
And include the interpretation portion also.
that it's together.
It's together, because we need to come to some understanding. And I'd like to know the responsibilities of the school nurses. It seems they even would like us to do exams, physical exams, which we cannot.
What?
Wasn't there a question about physical exams also?
Not that I know of.
I can show you maybe it was a misinterpretation, but I have,
I do know that my understanding was that they take them to an off-site.
well, that's
This is-
good. Then maybe it's my lack, I did not interpret it, but,
Can you imagine if Boston?
okay. I will show that to you, what I have.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, my gosh, oh, my gosh.
Do I have a motion to approve the Director of Public Health?
Mr. Chair, if I may be so bold, I would like to make a motion to approve the Director of Public Health report.
A second.
I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? That's it. Is there any other topics that would like to be brought before the Board of Health this time?
Mr. Chair, may I just, as I always do, that the influenza is definitely here. It is somewhat fierce, has been reported, but regardless, primary prevention is the way to go. So if you are ill, try to keep yourself from others. If you have concern about your degree of illness, please contact your provider. Wash hands if you can. Sneeze. I can't tell you, I've been taking the tea every day. Nobody does this. It's like a achoo. Anyway, so, love the tea. I love the tea, but we need better infection control. So please, take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves. Wash your hands. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Good night, everybody.